Rabbi Funnye would like to entertain a few questions, but we do have time.
I have a historical question for you. I know you've done some work amongst the Igbo.
Yes.
Usually when we think about the expulsion of Jews from the Iberian Peninsula, what's not included in most of the scholarly literature is that within one generation, there was the expulsion of the Jews from Songhai.
Right.
I know you've done some work with the Igbo. Have you heard of any traditions that when Askia Muhammad expelled the Jews from the Empire of Songhai, that some of them may have fled south to form ancestors to the communities that you're working with? Because usually when that literature includes the expulsion of the Jews from from Songhai, it stops. There's no...
It doesn't really follow up the expulsion. Well, actually, it traces back before that in Joseph Williams' work, Hebrewisms of West Africa, from the Nile to the Niger with the Jews. He traces the movements of the Limba people from Yemen, and then going from Yemen, traveling down the coast of East Africa, establishing Great Zimbabwe, and then eventually moving into the area that we call South Africa today. Amongst the Igbo and the Igbo and the Yoruba people, of whom I work with whom I work with in Cameroon, Nigeria, and Ghana, their traditions go back. My wife and in 2001, we made our first trip to Africa. The Obi, who's a local king, which is a Hebrew word, which means seer. One who can see and foretell the future. It's interesting because the Obi puts this chalk around his eyes to help him see. And he's the king priest in the Igbo people. The Obi pulled out this instrument, and it was a shofar. And then the Obi blew tekiah. And my wife looked at me, and I looked at my wife. Then the Obi blew shivareen. I fell out laughing. And so all of the elders said, like, you know, what's this dude laughing about? We're serious. And I said, that's a shofar. Jews around the world blow it at Rosh Hashanah to end Yom HaKippurim. And some communities it's blown to bring in the Shabbat. And some communities it's blown at Rosh Chodesh. And the notes that you blew are the ones that interest me, because those are the notes that we blow in the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah. Where did you get those notes? He said, they were handed down to us. So if we can determine how old those notes are, how far back, and maybe this is where some of your scholarship can come in. In certain Igbo communities, the Molim are women and not men. And I found that very interesting because in most African cultures and society, you know, men are up here and women are more suppressed. So when I saw this woman serving as a Moel, I said, what's up? And he said, Rabbi, it's the Bible. It's the Bible? It's the Bible. So that community took the Bible so literally. In the early part of Exodus, when Moses is going to return to Egypt to do the work that Hashem gives him, Zipporah has to circumcise their youngest son. And so in certain communities, on the 8th day, boys are circumcised among the Igbo and the Igbo. They don't eat pork, they don't eat shellfish. It's interesting. So they don't know what Glock kosher is, but they know what biblical kosher is. So as we begin the process of examining how these groups got there, I think with there being so little, no tradition of the Babylonian Talmud or the Yerushalayim Talmud, none of those things are there. is pure, straight, unadulterated, almost like the Beit Yisrael of Ethiopia. They had their own traditions that had essentially evolved, and being in that closer proximity to the Holy Land of Eretz Yisrael, their Sefer Torah was still in Ge'ez. It wasn't in Hebrew. So it was still a Semitic language, but it wasn't the Hebrew language. And look at that close proximity. So now measure that out by 6,000 miles this way and 9,000 miles going in this direction, and how language becomes lost. And you know, what I found interesting is when the scientists, the guy did the thing on the limba, and he did the swab and said that the Buba clan had a, you know, connected to the Kohanim. I just found it interesting when the Rabbanut said, "Oh, we don't deal with science. We deal, you know, that's just science. We don't believe science. We have to believe something else." Okay, fine. But I got to tell you, my best experience was I made my first trip to Israel 2 weeks ago, and it was a fantastic trip. Somebody else said it. Israel needs to do a better job of putting forth the true level of the diversity of its people. They're not doing a good job. And so someone spoke about anti-Semitism, anti-Israelism, anti-Jewishness in the African-American community, oftentimes than not. From that 15-second glimpse that you get on the news about what's going on in the Middle East, you see a tank. You see some kids with some bottles or some rocks. And so I said to the ambassador to the United States from the state of Israel, Michael Oren, I said, you guys have to do a much better job. Because right now, you see in the black community, folks not saying anything because as soon as they do, they're anti-Semitic, they're anti-Jewish, oh, they hate you, oh, no. What they see is Goliath and David. But they see the Palestinians as David. And they see the Israelis as Goliath. That formula has to be changed. It must be changed. Israel must do a better job of truly promoting and saying who she is as a culture and a society. Where when you really look at them, you see some Jews darker than me in Israel. And then you see some that look Arab looking. They're from every part of the world. And truly, it's a much better reflection of what Jews and Judaism are than we have and what we understand here in the United States. But that's not reflected. It is not reflected, their numbers, 5.5 million, to the numbers of nations that surround them that want her absolutely and utterly annihilated. That message is not out there. So part of my job is helping to get that message out in the African-American community, in other communities that, you know, where people let me come in and talk about this thing. So, yes, sir.
How were you received when you met with President Netanyahu?
Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Yes.
Well, I had met Prime Minister Netanyahu with his first election in the 96-97 in Chicago. And he was kind of stoic and standoffish. He was so